You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode number 84 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm super excited to have past guest of the podcast, LJ, come back and share about changes in his life since he was last on the podcast and what his world of recovery looks like today. And I will elaborate more on that momentarily. I really wanted to say how much I appreciated all the texts and emails I've gotten over the past week from podcast listeners, friends in meetings, and friends around the Bay Area about my recent health scare and hospitalization. LJ and I do talk about that in our conversation. But yeah, I'm pretty much back to normal. And was I really ever normal? Anyway, after having some health problems of his own, LJ stepped away from our meetings and sponsoring for a while and just recently came back to our noon Zoom group. After being back, he asked if he could do a podcast episode titled Perseverance is the Key, allowing God to guide us as he sees fit. And I thought this would be a really awesome idea. I've had quite a few guests lined up for future episodes, as well as waiting for some of the recordings from our recent SAA and COSA speaker meetings, but I've had some difficulties figuring out my schedule around those. So anyway, this really worked out great for me. And I was about to do another short update episode sharing some information about the Bay Area retreat and reading some information on sponsorship. So LJ has been a guest on past episodes number 5, 17, and 32, and we've talked a lot about sponsorship. Currently, he's moved into recovery coaching, which is a bit different than sponsorship, and we'll get into that in our conversation. Anyway, I wanted to select a few readings from the SAA pamphlet called Getting a Sponsor. There's lots of different questions that come up in this pamphlet. The first that I wanted to share is called, What is Sponsorship? Sponsorship is a mentor relationship. A sponsor is a member of the fellowship who has already worked the program and has experienced the gift of sobriety. The sponsor helps another SAA member or sponsee determine their own addictive sexual behavior and set appropriate boundaries. The sponsor guides the sponsee on how to use the literature and tools of the program, how to work the 12 steps and understand the traditions, and how to achieve and maintain sexual sobriety. While the SAA Fellowship is not a religious program, it is spiritual in nature. It has been our experience that a higher power will direct the recovery process. Sponsors listen and point the way. As the result of working SAA's 12-step program, sponsees may have a spiritual awakening and a desire to carry this message to other sex addicts. And here's what I really wanted to share. How do we obtain sponsors? This question comes up quite a bit. As newcomers, we are encouraged to start looking for a sponsor right away. Many of us went to a number of meetings until we found someone who had the recovery we wanted and asked them if they would help us get it too. If we were finding it difficult to get a sponsor, some of us asked someone to be our temporary sponsor. This is a member who may not be able to take us on full-time, but can help get us started working the steps until we can find a full-time sponsor. Many of us started with this type of relationship, and after a while it turned into a long-term sponsorship. When some of us could not attend face-to-face meetings, we found that we could still be sponsored by email, traditional letters, telephone, or even video chat. In fact, many members in SAA have achieved sexual sobriety while having never actually met their sponsor in person. If you're having difficulty finding a sponsor in the meetings you attend, the ISO office may be able to assist you. And there's a whole bunch of other questions here in this pamphlet, and I will be putting links to that in the show notes. And like I mentioned at our noon Zoom meetings and the emails here for the podcast, I had quite a few questions around sponsorship, and I still plan on doing a topic discussion on sponsorship soon. But in the meantime, I hope some of those readings from the pamphlet helped. So in my conversation with LJ, we do talk about some of the books he has self-published and what he does as a recovery coach. I made sure to talk about some guidelines before we recorded about what we could discuss in regards to things outside of the program of SAA in order to follow the SAA traditions. LJ gives his book and service away for free to those who are interested in his help. And I made sure that we were not promoting his business, but I would act as a conduit for anyone interested in further information. And I'll talk about that at the end of this episode as well. And so, without further ado, I am now ready to turn it over to my fun conversation with my friend LJ. Please enjoy.
I want you to see a poster. Can you make out that poster? It's backwards.
No, I could see it forwards.
Oh, okay, good. Then I'm seeing it backwards.
Yeah. A lot of times, our camera is set up for a mirror image.
So that was a poster that, by the grace of God, he instilled in me. The conversation of it, and the picture that's there is just it's spectacular because it's the forest. Mm-hmm. And what you have coming through the forest from the background is the sunlight. Ooh, so nice. It's God's sunlight coming into the forest. And if I ever have a moment that I just need to go ahead and take myself away, I can always put myself in the forest and have God bathe me with his light. So it's
nice.
Yeah. So,
it's always nice to have those pleasant reminders. And just thinking about that, when you texted me the other day when we were talking about getting this episode together, it was probably episode 17 that we were talking about the fact that you were going out on a fishing trip pretty soon. I don't remember if that was episode 5 or 17.
No, it was 17.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that you actually caught something there and have it displayed.
I did. I was so blessed. It was about a 5.5 foot, 6 foot tarpon, and that's specifically what we went after. I went with a friend of mine, and we both caught him. And it was just an amazing moment in my life. I like big fish, and big fishermen, and I like big game. And it's just an amazing thing to get something that large on a hook.
Yeah.
And just play with it. I was playing with it for over 25 minutes, and this thing was jumping through the air and going back and forth, pulling out the line, coming back in. Oh, it was just amazing.
Wow.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and you've got it on display now?
I do. I have it. It's I have a mount that was done, and it's very funny because I saved all my money up for getting the mount prior to going to fishing trip, because I knew, in fact, if I caught one, there was no way I was not getting a mount. I mean, you just don't do that.
Yeah.
So yes, I now have it displayed on the back side of my house on my patio, and it's because they're fiberglass. Nothing hurts them.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's just a beautiful sight. People get to see it and get to talk about it.
Awesome. Yeah, another reminder of a God moment.
Yeah, I'll give it to me because of recovery.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for recovery.
Yeah. So you have been away from meetings for a while, away from the podcast. So you were on episodes 5, 17, and we mentioned today at the noon groups, episode 32, where we were talking about the 9-step promises.
Right.
And then I have let the podcast community know, without the explicit diagnosis that you had, but that you had some issues going on and had stepped away from meetings and from sponsorship and things like that.
Yeah.
And so if you care hey, I haven't even announced, hey, we've got LJ back on the podcast. So if you care to announce, what happened with you,
Sure.
and then why you're back in the rooms now,
Okay. Sure.
and back on the podcast.
Well, it 9 months ago, actually it was like 10 months ago, things had really starting going downhill. And I had I had gotten diagnosed in 2019 with cognitive brain impairment.
Mm-hmm.
That was what they said. And we were going from one neurologist to another to get clearer conversations on what was really going on. And um, 9 months ago, I had been really at the bottom of where I was at mentally. The flame had, let's have you, in your mind
Mm-hmm.
was almost completely out. My flame had almost gone away. And I was no longer able to completely communicate with people and remembering conversations um, or information. 3 months later, we ended up at a neurologist from the University of Miami in Boca Raton.
Mm-hmm.
And they had been doing work, they were doing work with me. And in one of the tests that I had to take, I was in a room with a therapist and she gave me the first test, and I completed that. Then she gave me another test. And the moment she asked me to do the required test, I looked at it and I just bursted out crying.
Mm.
I was so distraught because I couldn't function. I couldn't function. The simple required test that she was asking me to do, I could
Mm-hmm.
not do. And it was almost as easy as ABC 1 2 3. And I
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And I couldn't do it. And the doctors there, thank God, put me on a drug that it's a new drug that came out for dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's called donepezil.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody listening, if they have family members who are with dementia or Alzheimer's, donepezil is a drug that they came out with recently. You might want to talk to your doctors or their doctors, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, say that you know someone that's taken it. And what's happened is in the last 3 months, I had started an upward trend on my thinking and my cognition, and to the point where I am today,
Mm-hmm.
where I've now gotten back to not completely where I was before,
Yeah.
but 110% better than where I was.
Nice.
And that was the gift of this new medication. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be back. Last Thursday, I came back to the meetings for the first time in 9 months, and
Mm-hmm.
the welcoming I got was just so heartfelt, and I felt so
Mm-hmm.
privileged, that I was remembered, and it was great to be there, and all that. The time that I was out, I was listening to podcasts. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the one that you did with John M,
Yeah.
who is, he's recovering from back operation, back
Yeah.
surgery, and I hear he's doing well. I just think it's awesome. You guys did a phenomenal job, and it was just great. John was a great interviewer, and it was good to hear
Yeah.
about your story, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to flip the script and have someone
Yeah,
ask me questions.
yeah,
There's a lot of times, we'll have back and forths and stuff, and I'll divulge, little bits of my recovery and my experience with whatever we're talking about, but not having someone kind of hit me with a bunch of questions. It's like, oh shit, I'm in the hot seat now.
yeah, exactly. Tonight, I had a quote unquote topic
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
wanted to call this, for tonight. And the topic that I wanted to call this is perseverance being the key and allowing God to guide us as he sees fit.
Nice.
So that's what I'd like to call this evening event.
Yeah.
Um, if it wasn't, I'd have to say perseverance is huge in has been huge in my recovery. Um, Without it, I wouldn't even be alive. I mean,
Hmm.
when I was at the worst in my with Alzheimer's before I got on medication, there had been suicidal thoughts,
Hmm.
and I was scared. And my wife doesn't know. I never told her that, but it's been something that it was for a little bit of time, it was problematic and it concerned me. Um, because it was like, I can't live this way.
Hmm.
You know, I was depressed. I was very depressed. And, I just kept persevering and pushing forward, even though I had only made little strides on a daily event. I knew that I knew that I needed to keep going. I knew
Hmm.
that I needed to keep going for not only for myself but for my wife. And what was I going to do? Leave my little doggy alone? And I couldn't do
Hmm.
that. My wife would come home. What happened? Well, he decided to kick off. I could see my wife talking to the dog, and the dog saying that. It's like I'd be in deep shit at that point. Uh, it's worked out. It's worked out for the best, and that word is just huge,
Yeah.
huge in my recovery. Um, just a driving force. And the the second part, you know, letting God guide us. I know for me, God has guided me into coaching,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I got licensed in the state of Florida. I'm a licensed certified recovery peer specialist. It's
Hmm.
designation CRPS, or in layman's terms, a recovery coach.
Yeah.
And um, it's given me the ability to assist others in recovery, um, who are not sponsees, and not to be a sponsor to take someone through the steps, but
Yeah.
to be a coach where I can coach someone they get to a sticking point. I can get them over the hump,
Oh,
and I can
nice.
assist and coach them right through. So that's been it's been really good to get back. Um, and because I got licensed in 2018, and then Alzheimer's started really kicking my butt in 19 and 20,
Hmm.
21. And, so now we're here, and now I've gotten back into coaching. And one of the things, too, is anybody who's listening, just know this: we coach pro bono, we
Nice.
don't charge. And the reason is, if God is intention for me to coach and get paid, I would have to charge people to let me help them.
Hmm.
And in fact, people of all economic levels, there are those people who are in recovery who can't afford a coach.
Yeah.
You could say it's on a sliding scale, but if your sliding scale at the bottom is $25, some people need that $25 for food for the week.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but it's true. So God's conversation with me was, you do a pro bono, pal, and I'll take care of you. And I was like, all right, I'm in. So it was all hands on deck, and that's how we've been doing it ever since. And it's been a blessing. And, anyone who is in need of coaching, they can contact me. We're available 24/7, 365. So we're back, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking of perseverance, a couple of things came to mind in recovery wise. Number one, the last episode I did was talking about my hospitalization.
Yeah.
And while I was sitting in the waiting room, I went to the ER twice. The first night we got there about midnight, my wife and I, and she had to take my son to school the next day, so I sent her home. The hospital is less than 5 minutes from my house, so we're really lucky. We've got two hospitals right near us. I ended up leaving at 3:30 in the morning, and just I had given up hope of being seen. They said it wouldn't be till daylight hours. The next time I went in was Saturday, and we got in there in the afternoon, and it's like, okay, I'll be able to ride this through. It's in the daylight hours. I'm good. And at points, me and my wife had to come back home, check on my son, see how he's doing, make sure he has dinner. Um, and there were times where I was just there alone and just feeling hopeless and just knowing that I've got to see this through. I need to I need to be seen in the hospital because some serious shit is going on. And the perseverance needed for that. It's just reminded that I need to stick it through so I can be healthy for my family, and that I can recover. And after 7.5 hours of waiting, going from one waiting room to another waiting room and then back to the original waiting room and just going stir crazy, uh, it was difficult, but finally had a little breakthrough, and they found a room for me and was able to be seen. And from there on, everything just kind of went rapid fire. The other thing was back in 2013, I went out on a hiking trip with about six program friends. We went to Sequoia National Forest and did this wonderful hike. And I love hiking, but it was high altitude, and I'm not that great in shape. I can hike for a couple of hours, but this is a backpacking weekend, and not realizing how high we were going. I think we got up to probably 9,600 feet.
Wow.
And yeah, and I'm not used to hiking in that altitude. And,
Mm,
and a couple of the other guys were just like running and just having fun.
mm.
They had their backpacks, they're sitting there running. And there was like this one hill where I looked, and it must have been maybe a 30-foot rise, not that far, but it's like I could only take three steps at a time, and huffing and puffing and busting out the beef jerky, and trying to do whatever I could to get some
Right.
energy. But
Right.
my thoughts at that moment was, my wife and son are at home. I need to see this through so I can make it to the top, make it up and over, make it to the camp that we camped on a lake. It was just absolutely beautiful. But
Wow.
there was a period of time where people are passing me by on the trail. I'm just like, how am I going to make this? And the analogy to the program is one step at a time. So just looking at the step work, I know early on in my recovery, looking at the 12 steps, and it's just like I'm never going to get through this. And the fourth step as well, such a huge step. I'm never going to get through it, but it's just like one little bit at a time, one little bit at a time, and eventually I make it through. So it's that perseverance that you talk about. And it led to an incredible weekend. And I'm really grateful that I did that. And thank God that the other guys were patient enough to hang out and wait until we got to a certain checkpoint, and then they would take off again. So
Hmm.
anyway, those
Yeah,
thoughts came to mind with perseverance.
that's good. When I was listening to your podcast, podcast 83,
Yeah.
I felt so bad. I was like, there's nothing. what kind of power did I have? I'm over here, over
Yeah.
there. There's, I couldn't drive over and give you a banana. It's like there was nothing I could do, and I just to hear you go through it when you went through it, I felt for you and I was rooting for you, and I'm so glad. And how is that issue that you have? Max, it's how's it
Yeah. Yeah, it's going fine. I had blood work done. My hemoglobin counts are rising, and I'm back to work. Everything
going?
seems normal. A couple times here and there, I get out of breath a little bit more because my blood levels aren't to where they were, so I've got to work a little bit harder to get the oxygen that I need. I've noticed sometimes, like when I'm bending over to get something, I get a little bit of a head rush and have to remind myself to take it slow and things like that. But for the most part, back to normal. Finally, after January, I've had all the respiratory stuff, and it was hard to speak on the microphone for a while. But I got through all of that, and just back to normal and doing what I can. And I haven't had any reoccurrences of what landed me in the hospital.
Good, good.
And so both my wife and I are looking at our digestion and nutrition in a whole new way and
Yeah,
stuff
absolutely.
as we're in our 50s now. And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, I never used to think about this stuff, but yeah, got to start paying attention. So
Amen. It's the
yeah.
truth. It's the truth.
uh,
Well, I have since our last broadcast,
yeah.
I've self-published two books.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is Relentless Recovery. It's a takeoff from Tim Grover, the incredible NBA trainer. Uh,
Hmm.
and he has a book called oh man, here's my memory. I'll find it. From good to great to unstoppable. That's the name of
Nice.
the book. It's relentless. From good to great to unstoppable. So it's called Relentless from Good to Great to Unstoppable. And he is just the coincidental trainer of the world's gifted athletes in basketball. Jordan, Pippen, Bryant, Dwayne Wade. And he has a philosophy which is I align with as a not only as a recovering addict, but also as a sponsor
Hmm.
in how to work. And as a recovered addict, what I do on a daily basis, it's we have to. I have to. I have to go ahead and move myself in such a circle and
Hmm.
such circles that it's this way. I have to be so precise in what I do. Um, I have to be so diligent at doing the work every day, day
Hmm.
in, day out, day in, day out. And that has been the the strength of my recovery is following a program that rigorous. And look, in this disease, all you have to do is fail once. That's all you need. That's all it takes.
Hmm.
When I lost a sponsee back in, I want to say 2015 or 16. He was a sheriff's deputy officer right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida,
Yeah.
Broward Sheriff's Officer. And he was in the throes of the addiction and he committed suicide. And you only need one bullet to kill you.
Yeah.
That's it. And it was sad because he has 5 children. And the beauty of his wife, the beauty of the thing that's been nice though, his wife, God bless her, had gone on to find another man who also had 4 children. So now they have 9 children. So
Wow.
a virtual Brady bunch And it's really nice to see her moving forward with her life, even though there was such a tragedy.
Yeah.
Um, but then the second book is this is a 400 pager.
Whoa.
Yeah, this is a 400 pager. This is Recovery Monologue.
Hmm.
And this was a 10-year project that I created back in 2008 as a blog. Recovery Monologue started out as a blog in
Hmm.
2008. And there's over 50 chapters in the book. And you equate each chapter to being a meeting.
Hmm.
There's a topic, and then after the topic are the shares that people went ahead and added to the topic. And there are, in some chapters, there are 30, 40 shares, and some chapters there are 15 and 20 shares. But the point was that what it did was it gave the ability for anybody, just like with your podcast, which
Hmm.
I'm so grateful for. Your podcasts are 24/7. We can
Yeah.
go 24/7. Well, that's what Recovery Monologue was. Recovery Monologue was a blog that was available 24/7. So a person can go to a meeting 24/7. Well, when I started failing mentally, I had a choice, and I shut down the website,
The blog. Yeah.
the blog. I shut down the blog. But what I did before I shut it down was I printed it.
Oh, nice.
And then when I printed it, obviously I had a hard copy, but then I went and took the hard copy, took it to a publisher, not a publisher, excuse me, a printer, and they scanned it and they gave me flash drives.
Nice. Yeah.
So anybody who wants the book, all I do is send them a flash drive.
Nice.
um, so it's either that or I can download it. They can have the digital download, either one, Relentless Recovery and Recovery Monologue are both digital downloads. If they're interested in one, they just let me know and I'll be more than happy, free of charge, to go ahead and get it to them because I know the fact that if um, recovery's priceless. You can't put a price on it.
Hmm.
And I know that the gift that I've had to be able to bring it forth in pages of a book have been priceless for me. And, and I also know that in giving it away, I keep getting it back. It's my step 12. And as often as I can give it away, I know that it's going to come back tenfold. So I like to give it away as much as possible. So
Awesome.
anyone listening, if you're interested in getting either a copy of either one of those books, just email me. And can I give my email address?
I will take care of that.
You'll take
So
that?
yeah,
Okay, you take care of that.
what I've done before is God, my cat is making noise. Yeah, so what I've done in the past is anyone that's interested can email me and I'll put the podcast emails and then I'll forward that on to you. And
Okay, yeah. No
so
problem
it
whatsoever.
it helps with the traditions
Okay,
and things like that. So
absolutely. I get it.
we're on the up and up,
Yeah.
and yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to give it away for free as it was given to me freely. So that's the gift. I feel blessed, truly blessed to be able to give it away. So, um, and let's see. You have anything else you want to ask me?
Yeah, you had sent me an email prior to getting on here, and there were some things that you had written there, and bullet points and things that we can expand upon that was in that.
Sure. What those were was in my coaching,
Hmm.
I work with people on attachment techniques. And attachment techniques is a conversation regarding the attachments we have towards individual thoughts, feelings, or experiences.
Hmm.
And I know that I have this experience that that I would act out. So you hear people talk about the going. Well, we talk about
Hmm.
going to any length going to any length to keep our recovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first technique is called throwing the baby over the bridge technique. And that is that, and I don't have children, but I use my kids, which are four-legged, as an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So, would I be willing to take one of my kids, my dogs, and throw it over a bridge down to a road below where cars are going by and just be happy and carefree about that? And the answer is absolutely no.
Exactly. Made me kind of
Exactly. Jaw
jaw drop.
dropping.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I call that throwing the baby over the bridge technique. And when people hear it, and people I talk to, I've used this with, they have children. Now the funny thing is, like, if it I laugh about this what I want to talk to you about in this next second.
Yeah. Yeah.
They may be married. They may be married. Okay.
Hmm.
They have kids and they may be married. So in being married, um, you know, would they throw their wife over the bridge? And the answer is sure. We'll get rid of her. And it's like, especially when a person's divorced, it comes across as really funny. But the reality is, you know, no, you don't want that. We're not
Yeah.
looking for that. And they have their children. So when the children are brought up, it's like, no, I'm protecting my child as, they're my baby. I'm not getting, letting anyone hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Well, what about your ex-wife? Well, that's a different story. Let's toss her over instead. And we don't do that, obviously, but it's the technique, the conversation called throwing the baby over the bridge. And it works. And people have learned, people that I've worked with have said that it's a very interesting technique when they go ahead, when they think they want to act out, they go ahead and they have the subliminal.
Hmm.
What it is, these are subliminals, and they have the subliminal attachment. They have a subliminal attachment that says, if I act out, it's like throwing my baby over the bridge.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, if I act out, it's like me taking one of my kids and throwing them over the bridge. I'm not going to do that. So we
Hmm.
don't act out.
Wow.
And the next one is for having attachments, you having attachments to things. Uh, let's see. I'm an attachment. Let me think. Um, I used to I used to ponder the thought, what people thought of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had these thoughts about what people thought of me, and it would stop me from doing things. They might think I'm bad, they might think I'm ridiculous, they might think I'm stupid, they might think I'm a jerk, they might think all kinds of things. And I had attachments toward that, and using that conversation, what people thought of me. And what I found out was that, and here's how the technique works. This technique's called kicking the negativity driver out of your driver's side car front seat technique.
Okay.
And, if we're going down the road of life and we're in our car,
Hmm.
there's two seats in the front.
Hmm.
There's the driver's seat and there is the passenger seat. Well, in my life, I had been living in this passenger seat, even though I was driving the car. I was living in the passenger seat with with Mr. Negativity
Hmm.
being the driver, saying you can't do this, you're a failure, you're this, that, and everything else. And I couldn't get anywhere. I wasn't able to make things happen, complete tasks, because I had this attachment that I was a failure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I got was that the car stopped, you get out of the passenger side, walk around to the driver's side. Mr. Negativity is driving, yank him out, toss him to the side, me get in the car. Now, guess what? I can handle things. I'm not a failure. I
Mm-hmm.
got this world going I'm handling things as they come to me. I am completely a different person because I believe in myself because I've given up the attachment that I'm a failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have like the recognition, but I have a lot of times when I'm in it, I have such a hard time moving out of it. So, that's something that I can kind of look at the metaphor and see if I can how that works for me the next time that happens. But
There you go.
yeah, yeah,
There you go.
I've been in recovery for a long time, but those thoughts still haunt me.
Yes.
And um yeah, I can't there are times in my marriage it's like fuck, I just I can't do anything right. I fucked this up. Just and I start to stew in it, and
Yes.
the longer I stew in it, the harder it is. But thinking about it as at that point, that person is in control of the car.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you listened to one of the most recent episodes I had done. It was somewhere in the 80s, maybe 82. I had played a song called High Ren, and it's this guy talking with his subconscious. And so he's got the negative voice and the positive voice, and it's just going back and forth. And just the negative one just driving home, who the fuck are you? And then the positive one is like, I'm distancing myself from you, and I'm gonna try to make things in my life much better. Once I wall you off. So it really, really comes down to the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are two techniques that I use with people in coaching, and they've been successful, and it's a funny thing. You're 2 years longer in recovery than I am. I'm 18.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah.
20.
20 years in recovery and 8 years sobriety.
There
So
you go.
yeah,
It's been
almost 8 years.
there you go.
Couple
Um
more months.
it's been it's been a kick-ass conversation.
Hmm.
A kick-ass conversation. And um I just look at people. It was funny because we were in group today,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
somebody said we were in the breakout room, and they said, when I first came into the room, there you were, LJ, and you had a smile on your face, and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
I probably did, and they're like, I don't know why you were so damn happy. I'm like, and it's like, pal, I get it. In the very beginning, no one's happy. We're all miserable.
Hmm.
But we learn to grow, and um, we learn to gain our education and recovery over time. And by the grace of God, we pull up our bootstraps and we do, excuse me,
Hmm.
whatever is necessary in order to keep our sobriety. And that means, whatever is necessary. If that means that you do not have a video display phone, you have just a flip phone, which is
Hmm.
numbers, then you get rid of your video display phone. That means if you drive areas that are in bad areas, then you
Hmm.
find a new route to get where you got to go, whatever it takes. There's no question, whatever it takes, no matter what. And that's key. That's
Hmm.
key. Um, and it's been really, really good. And the ride hasn't always been. It's not linear by any stretch of the imagination. Well, it is linear, but it's not always been up and down and always been up. There have been
Yeah.
my lows as well. And but the thing is, I've been on a high for so long with recovery. That's what, even though I have Alzheimer's, that's what has kept me positive, because
Mm-hmm.
I've had, recovery has given me a foundation that I can stand on. And I can say to myself, I have a lot. I may be losing my mind. However, what I have is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
It's priceless. So I'm very, very grateful for recovery.
Yeah, yeah. And when you were mentioning having the knowledge and being able to give it away, and there's so many times, with definitely with the podcast, but in the fellowship hour after our meeting is over, and being able to, someone poses a question, and it's like, oh, hey, I've got an answer for that, and it's just something that is so awesome to be able to help someone
Yes.
with. And then just recently, I've been working on someone, we just got through steps 4 and 5, and another two of my sponsees are working on steps 8 and 9. And as we're going through those, and just being able to, when we hear some of the deep dark stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, hey, guess what, I did that too.
Exactly.
And it's a little bit of a relief to hear on the opposite end that
Yes.
someone else has gone through this, and hey, this is what I did for this step, and this is how I managed to get through this crisis, and things like that. And that when I get off those calls, that there's just this energy that wasn't there prior to that phone call. And so a lot of times with program calls, I hate to bug you. Step work calls, I know you're busy, but can you help me out with this? And I'm sorry for using up your time. When I get off those phone calls, it's like, fuck, I feel so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
It's a steroid shot. I feel
yeah,
like, it's huge. I love
yeah.
fellowship. I love fellowship after the meetings. And exactly the reason you were talking about, talking to newcomers and getting them started on their way. Yeah, it's awesome.
Hmm.
There's nothing better.
Yeah.
There's nothing better.
So, yeah, it's awesome to have you back in the rooms. It's awesome to
Thank
have you
you.
back on the podcast. So,
I
I'm
appreciate it, Rob.
really grateful
Thank
for
you.
that. Is there anything you wanted to touch on before we close this one out?
Um, Actually, no, I think we covered it all. I'm really grateful to be here. Grateful to
Yeah,
be on the show tonight, and wish you more success health wise.
thank you.
And just keep on keeping on. That's it.
Sweet. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, LJ.
Thank you. Take care, Jason. Bye
See
bye.
ya. I'm so grateful to have LJ back here on the podcast and back at our noon Zoom meetings. I had a lot of fun recording this episode. And like I had mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, LJ has published a couple of books and is now doing recovery coaching where he helps people who are stuck in their steps, as well as coaching people how to be sponsors. So wanting to stick with the SAA traditions, especially our favorite tradition, Tradition 10, on outside causes or issues. This is not a place that we're promoting people's self-interest. And like he had mentioned, his books he gives away for free, as well as not charging for his coaching. And so he's taking what he has learned and handing that over to people in recovery. And instead of posting his information, his website, email, or phone number, I thought that I would act as a conduit for anyone who was interested in those things. They can get a hold of me and I will get them in touch with LJ. So for the end of this episode, I wanted to play a few songs related to what LJ and I were talking about, as well as reading a few emails that we've gotten. But yeah, first turning to music with the topic of perseverance. Perseverance is the key. There were a few songs that I was thinking about. Rush's song Marathon I thought about playing that, but that is a little bit more about persistence rather than perseverance. But one that I did find is from a reggae band called Common Sense, and this song is called Never Give Up.
You're gonna get rough. I've got to keep on moving. Never give up. I can't say it enough. We've got to keep on moving. Never give up. Things are gonna get tough. I've got to keep on moving. Never give up. I can't say it enough. We've got to. Trial and tribulation cannot get in our way. We've run gold and that's gone to play. Fussing and fighting no longer has a place. We've got no time to wait. But there's one thing we can get out. Never give up, 'cause things are gonna get rough. I've got to keep on moving. Never give up, I can't say it enough. We've got to keep on moving.
I absolutely love the inspiration of the song and put it on when I need a little lift me up and the message of keep going forward. I have this coupled with another song on one of my mixed CDs called Don't Ever Let Nobody Drag Your Spirit Down by Eric Bibb. But again, that is a little bit of a different message. But yeah, there were a couple songs right in there that were kind of looking at that same thing of keeping moving forward. So right before LJ left the Zoom rooms, he had been talking about doing a podcast episode on the book that he mentioned called Relentless Recovery. And we were working on cultivating that as an episode, but the Alzheimer's was really kicking in and we never moved forward with that. But as we were talking about it, I thought of a song called Relentless, and just thinking of Relentless Recovery. And this is by the band Walls of Jericho, and it is a hardcore metal song. Candace, their singer, she's got a really rough, angry voice. So it may be a little harsh, but it starts off with a bunch of people saying, I am relentless.
I am relentless.
I am relentless.
I am relentless.
I'm relentless.
I am relentless. I am relentless. I am relentless.
I am.
I am relentless.
I
I'm relentless. I'm relentless.
We will never stop. We're relentless. We will never give up. We're relentless. We will never give up. We're relentless. We will never stop. We're relentless.
So yeah, I played a little bit of how it segues into the song there. And I did want to play the end of the song. And again, for people who aren't used to these harsh vocals, I'll read out what she's saying. Without struggle, there is no strength. So God grant me strength.
Without struggle, there is no strength. So God grant me strength.
I totally love that. Love that song. And over the past week, I've gotten quite a few songs from people at meetings, sending me stuff through the chat on Zoom, and also got a few texts around other songs, but I will have to save those for another episode. Turning now to some emails. One of them I'm not going to read in its entirety, but I did want to cover a little bit of it. There were a few that I got right after episode 83, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, that I got a lot of emails and texts from people about my hospitalization and making sure that I was okay. This one I've been meaning to email back and haven't had the chance to. But yeah, it says, Dear Jason, I just listened to your recent episode. I'm just writing to wish you well following your recent illness. I could hear your gratitude for being alive and your love of music. I listen to your podcast regularly and just wanted to thank you for all the good you do and for the people you don't even know. Also, for your passion of music. I've really enjoyed looking for the music that you mentioned. I only noticed Tool in the last 5 years, but I have been listening to them a lot more recently and loving it. and slowly transitioning to electric guitar, so hopefully I can play some of their riffs someday. I'm recovering in a similar fellowship and really enjoy and learn a lot from your podcast. I just wanted to thank you and hope that you make a full recovery. Warm wishes, and the initial P. And yes, I really wanted to write back. I've got a couple of videos out there on YouTube that may be of help in learning some tool riffs. So I will definitely write back for that. But yeah, I've had a very, very busy week. So I haven't gotten back to all of the emails. Another one, this is the one that I was originally looking for, that I won't read the entire thing, but I did want to read part of it. Hello, Jason. Thank you for the podcast on gratitude. I'm grateful that you are recovering from your medical issues. And I'm going to skip a little bit. And this comes from, and I will say his name, Jim L., who is currently serving as the interim editor of the Outer Circle, and that is the newsletter that the ISO puts out every other month. And he said he's continually searching for good recovery articles, and I'm paraphrasing here throughout the rest of this email. Paraphrasing that he thought my episode on gratitude and grateful for being alive would make a good article. So I will be contributing to the Outer Circle later on this year. And I'll be sure to leave a link on how to find the Outer Circle newsletter in the show notes. And I really hope to have Jim on the podcast soon, and I'll have to work out stuff, but he has been in the program and done a lot of great service work with the ISO and various committees, Litcom and a number of other things. So I've been really wanting to have him on the podcast for quite a while. Anyway, thank you so much for writing in. And yes, I am recovering very well and still feeling that gratitude each and every day. The last email that I wanted to read is a fairly lengthy one, so I will start here. Dear Jason, I love the podcast. I live in a small community in the developing world, and so there are no meetings here. Obviously, there are online meetings here, but the podcast is a massive part. I have a story that may conflict with some traditions, but I know you are very sincere in terms of checking content against the traditions. If it is appropriate in any form for the podcast feedback section, I'm sure you'll let me know. Do let me know if you think any of it will be useful, and I can answer that as a yes for this. Back to the email. I came into recovery in 2001. I went to all the S fellowships in London at the time, but settled in SA. I'll tell it straight, although I realize it wouldn't suit the traditions to set one fellowship against another. Going with a zero tolerance to lust approach allowed a certain kind of recovery to occur. In SA, everyone has the same bottom line, and according to that definition, I got 18 months, then 18 years SA bottom line sobriety. I was celibate for 10 years before I married my now wife of 9 years. In SA, there is no possibility to be gay or bisexual. And he references Anchatwa, mentioned this as a reason for moving on, referring to episode number 74. Back to the email. So I always treated gay thoughts the same as every other sexual thoughts, lust, to be eliminated. To cut a long story short, when COVID started, we went into lockdown and some of the normality of my life began to crumble. My quite excessive devotion within traditional religion seemed to be out of control, and I tried to get a sobriety around that. As my faith crumbled, my wife was devastated since our marriage was built on our religion. We went into a rough period during COVID, like a lot of people. I started Religious Addicts Anonymous, which is not yet a fully approved 12-step fellowship. Another story. I switched a more mindful, embodied, faith-free of compulsive religious practices. About 9 months into this, I felt something in my body which was quite different. Since I now had an embodied spiritual practice, a much more embodied sexuality started emerging, and it was not straight. It was fully gay. This coming out had deepened in the last 2 years, and I now see that my sexuality is fundamentally gay, although things are still okay in the marriage. From the perspective I have now, a very traditional lust model of recovery and a very compulsive faith work together to keep the queer feelings buried, but at a cost. The 18 years sobriety included 3 breakdown type of experiences, even though I was doing all the suggestions, and I was a frontline advocate for full big book recovery. The bad news side of this change, accepting gay sexual feelings, that it is now harder to stay sober. I'm only coming out to trusted friends and not to my wife. With the whole repressed sexuality pre-COVID, years would flow by without even a desire to look at porn. Now I have faced some shadow and allowed some of my sexuality out. The porn sabotage impulsive is back, and in the last 2 years, I've had 9 months, 6 months, and 3 months porn-free, but I don't take any of that for granted now. The reason why this story may be useful to other addicts is that I wish I had been able to examine the strange mix of sexual thoughts with truthfulness much earlier on in recovery, and that the impulse to stop all sexuality was, in hindsight, not healthy. Where this approach is linked with compulsive prayer and so on, this may be tantamount to keeping a major part of ourselves locked away, unheard, and unknown. But these parts demand to be heard, and some approaches recovery may prevent this. Jason, thanks again for all you do. If the story never goes any further, that's totally fine. I'm glad you heard it. Best, M. P.S. I'm so sorry I forgot to say, get well soon, my friend. And wow, this is an incredible email. I did mention a few episodes ago that I would love to do an episode comparing different S fellowships. This is an SAA podcast, so most of our guests speak from what they know of, and that is talking about the SAA message. And I think it would be important to talk about some of the other S fellowships, SLAA, SA. There's also SCA, but I do not have any experience in any of those fellowships, so I am looking for guests to have been to multiple fellowships to share their experiences with that, and we're not trying to, as you said in the beginning of this email, trying to set any fellowship against each other. I was looking at some of our literature, and it was basically Tradition 10, I think, that I was looking at, that we don't have an opinion on other fellowships. We just tell what we know of, and that is recovery through SAA. But wow, yeah, such an incredible email, and I am so grateful for you writing in. I will definitely personally respond to this via email. So with all that out of the way, I wanted to close up this episode. If you wanted to send feedback for the podcast, like the one that I just read, you can send email to feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to get a hold of me or have me serve as a conduit between past guests, which has definitely happened in the past, and including LJ here, you can send me an email at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and would be happy to answer any emails there. A few closing short notes. I've been diligently working with the Bay Area Retreat Committee, and so looking forward to our retreat that is coming up at the end of March here. If anyone is in the Bay Area and wanting to attend, we do have the registration link still open on the BayAreaSAA.org website under announcements. And we are looking to get people registered by March 17th. The event is March 31st through April 2nd. And we'd like to get as accurate a head count as possible 2 weeks before the event, so we can let our retreat center know exactly how many people will be there. So if you're on the fence, please, try to get that registration in before the 17th. And I will be doing a workshop there at the retreat talking about the podcast and recording a conversation. I did one in 2019, learning how to edit and what topics to be able to discuss here on the podcast. And this workshop will be much like that. This one will be definitely for use for the public on the podcast. The other one was done just so I could learn how to edit the podcast and was never meant for public consumption. But we had a fantastic workshop, and I would love to repeat something like that with the goal in mind that this will become an episode of the podcast. So other things coming up, I've got a few more guests lined up for the podcast. Like I mentioned, I'm also waiting for some links from the past SAA and COSA speaker meeting that we had at the beginning of February. And we will also be doing another episode of tradition study, looking at traditions 4, 5, and 6, and also finishing up on 3 before we get started with those. And that will be coming up in a few weeks. So look forward to those. And with that, I think I am ready to close out this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.